Hey everybody, it's Josie here. I'm going to be doing a very specific video today. So it is, June has been Pride Month, and I've been reading all things kind of queer and pride-ish, which I normally read anyway, but really been focusing on it. And what I thought would be fun is I do a lot of charity shopping for books, and over the months, or over the year really, I've managed to pick up quite a few sort of 90s titles, so 90s adult lesbic titles, which you don't really see much of nowadays. And it's really interesting because I've been doing a lot of researching and reading and a lot of things about sort of the history of literature, of queer literature, and I kind of wanted to have a look at the evolution of it. So when you see some of the kind of, like in the 1950s, you had very sort of pulpy releases that were kind of, yeah, sort of pulp lesbian romances that tended to go very badly wrong, and somebody tended to die and it was all terrible at the end. And actually, I did see some of them in Gaze the Word the other day, which is this fabulous queer bookstore in London, if you don't know. And I think I'm going to grab a couple of those titles because I've read sort of excerpts, but I've never actually read a full title. And actually, there's a great book by, oh God, what is her name? Oh, her name escapes me, but there's a book called Pulp, Robin Daly. God, I did a whole video on Robin Daly. There's her latest book is called Pulp, and it has these kind of dual timelines of now and then sort of the 50s, early 60s. And it talks about that kind of pulp fiction from that era. So we moved on, and then through the 80s and the 90s, and the 90s had sort of a slew of these kind of like lesbic titles that luckily weren't particularly tragic. No one was dying because they were lesbians, which is great. But I wanted to see how I thought they were now, how they compared against the stuff that I'm reading now, a lot of the newer things that have come out. I think queer literature has really evolved over the years. I mean, I was in Waterstones in London sort of a week ago, and the section, the kind of LGBTQIA section, has just exploded. It's now 3 or 4 shelves big, where, you know, it used to be sort of just one little niche shelf that around the back of the store, and they have, you know, 2 people dedicated to really updating that section, which I think is really good. And I think particularly YA also has really exploded over the last few years, and you get some really fantastic queer YA titles. I think adult weirdly still has to catch up a little bit, because some of it is very overwrought, dramatic, sort of romancy, slightly pulpy still. And then there are some really great titles, but I think almost YA is leading the way. So I think adult queer lesbian fiction really needs to up its game. But yeah, so I thought, let me try out these ones this month, seeing as it's Pride Month, and see what I thought of them. And it was a mixed bag, I'm not gonna lie. So the first one I've got here is, this book here is Shame About the Street. They've all got really weird covers. There must have been a fashion for these kind of drawn, slightly odd covers. So this one is by Diane Langford. And oh God, how do I describe this book? Okay, so you've got sort of 2 main characters. You've got Madeline, who's a reporter, and then Rosemary, I think, yeah, who works in the government. And really, I found the plot quite confused. That's why I'm really struggling on how to really describe this. But it seems to be that you've got, so this is set in the UK, and Rosemary, who works in the government, has been kind of in the media that she was sort of leaking things, and I'm not even entirely sure what she was meant to be leaking. And then you've got kind of sort of trade unionist type scenarios going on. And Rosemary's also sort of outed in the media of being sort of the lesbian mole within the government. And then there's kind of sort of slightly relationshipy stuff. The bit that it's just really confused. I really didn't understand what the kind of driver of the plot is. The things that I did like about this book were sort of, there were a couple of scenes in 90s gay bars, with sort of like the women in the bars and kind of slightly butchers and femmes, and by the way, I've got my 90s garb on, just in case you're wondering. This is my throwback to how I used to dress in the 90s. But yeah, it's so I like that element. Yeah, I don't know if I liked anything else about this book. I just found it really confusing. I just didn't get what the plot was trying to say. I think it was almost just an excuse to write some queer ladies, and yeah. So I mean, I don't know, 1.5 stars. I just didn't get it. I didn't get this one. I'm sorry. The next one was interesting. So this is a mixed bag. So the next one I read is called Minimax, and it's by an author, what's her name, Anna Liver. Yeah, so this is the book here. So this is Minimax, again with the kind of drawn cartoonish, although I quite like this one with sort of the crystal ball, and like I said, there seemed to have been a run on these kind of covers in the 90s. So I've read another Anna Liver book, and I'll tell you about that one afterwards, because that one's better. So this one, it's a bit strange and surreal. So the other Anna Liver book I read as well was a little bit strange, but this one is kind of odd. So you've got Minnie, who's the main character, and her relationship has ended. So she's kind of moping and sulking, and she gets 3 letters. So one is from her family in Australia, asking her to come and visit. The next one is from her friends in San Francisco, asking her to come and visit. And the third one is from Natalie Barney, saying, I must see you. In New York. Now, Natalie Barney is I don't think she's actually around anymore, was a kind of poet and writer, very famous lesbian back in sort of the 1920s in Paris. There's a great book called Wild Girls by Diane Southam that I read that focuses on her relationship. It's really, really good. So she's a real character, and I think the premise is that Minnie has read her stuff and has kind of written to her to say how much she likes her. So it kind of struck me as odd that she would still be around. But anyway, so she gets these 3 letters. And from then, it gets a little bit confusing again. So she goes to visit, you get these different scenes where she goes to visit her family, and you get all of the kind of family drama, which, if I'm totally honest, wasn't my favorite thing about the book. I found those sections just a tiny bit boring. Then you've got it sort of jumps to San Francisco. So she's in Australia with her family. Then it jumps to San Francisco, where she's gone to visit her friends, and she's kind of in the friend's spare room, and there's sort of a hint of past sexual relationships. And then you've got the part with Natalie Barney, which, let's just say vampire. It's very weird. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's not wholly entertaining, but just in a really odd way. So again, it almost feels like you're trying to get a gay character into a scenario, and then you get this weird, on a boat, they're on a yacht, and it's Natalie's a vampire, and the character Minnie's really in love with her. I don't know, it's just it's weird, but just for pure entertainment, probably 2.5 stars, just because it was so odd. What I would say is that if you're going to read an Anna Liver book kind of from the 90s, read this one, Bruised Fruit. This one is also a tiny bit surreal, but the main character, I'm trying to remember what her name is, no, Sydney? No, Caroline, sorry. So Caroline's the main character. She's gay. She's been in quite an abusive relationship. And she ends up leaving London and going to San Francisco. And then she kind of meets this cast of really interesting characters. And there's also a bit of like a thriller element to this one. And it reminds me a little bit of Tales of the City by Mr. Maupin, which are fantastic books. So I would definitely say, if you're going to read an Anna Liver book, read Bruised Fruit, because this one is a lot more fun. Also, it is a bit more sensical. The vampire thing, it was quite nonsensical towards the end. It was just a bit even too weird for me. So, read this one. And then the last one I read, which was probably the one I enjoyed the most, if I'm totally honest with you, is this one over here. So, again with the cover, it is Calendar Girl by Stella Duffy. So this one is a little bit of a kind of a relationship drama meets crime thriller. So you've got the main character, I don't remember what her name is, Maggie. She's a stand-up comedian, and she starts a relationship with this kind of mysterious woman. You never really get a name, and she's just like this gorgeous, gorgeous, beautiful woman. She starts a relationship with her, and they have quite a lengthy relationship. And then you've got another storyline where you've got a detective who, she's a PI, and she's been asked to track down this woman called September. And this woman used to meet regularly, like every few months or every half year or something, with this man. And you don't really know the nature of the relationship in the beginning, but he's just saying she's kind of gone missing, and he wants to know what's happened to her. He thinks something terrible has happened to her. So you've got these two intertwining stories. So you've got a slight sort of mystery story going on. And then I think she ends up going to New York to sort of uncover that portion. I think Suzanne is her name. She goes to New York to kind of uncover that portion of the story. And then you've got the other story, Maggie's story and relationship piece. And I'll be honest, I actually quite enjoy this. It was a lot more fun to read. It wasn't as surreal. I kind of enjoyed there were some love scenes in this. I liked kind of the romance element, the slight sort of thrill. I mean, you could see the twists and turns coming from a mile off. If you're reading it because you want to read a very twistery thriller, no. But it was just sort of a fun, kind of slightly pulpy, the lesbian romancy / thriller book. So I would give this one 3 stars. I kind of enjoyed that one. So yeah, so that was my spin around 90s lesbic. All in all, I'd have to say, if I'm summing it up, I do prefer some of the newer titles. I have read, so there's a couple of books that I've read that are kind of thriller, lesbian thrillers, but they're sort of published later, so in the sort of early 2000s, or later 2000s actually was one of them, and I probably enjoyed those more, plus the sex is better in those. So there are, like I said, I felt like some of them were just written to kind of have a lesbian main character, but the plot was a little bit like that, especially Shame on About the Street. Maybe I'm missing the point, but yeah, plot wasn't there for me. So I think we've progressed well. I think they were an interesting start. I think we're getting to a place that's a lot better, a lot more interesting, with a lot more content, and I'm loving it at the moment. Yeah, so that is my spin around 90s. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've read any 90s titles and if you think they're good, or if you have any recommendations, and I will speak to you all again very soon. Bye bye.